Richard Rohr said, "Our task is not to define what is sacred, but to expand our perception to recognize God's indwelling presence throughout the entire universe." Or as I've heard Matt Kahn say, and as I've adopted for myself, there is only God. Or relatedly, as Marianne Williamson has said, there is only love, or everything is love or a call to love. Or as I like to say, there is God risen and there is God crucified. Those things and those people that we see that are downtrodden or that are in their sin still. I don't really like to use that word, but the chains that we have. That is God crucified, God weeping. And even Jesus talked about the least of these, you've done it unto me. So he's saying the least of these is me. That's the way I read it. When Matt Kahn says there is only God, even the things that are painful and challenging, even the things that are brought to light that are pure wickedness, it's an opportunity. It's always an opportunity. It's always a teaching. It's always, if your wickedness comes face to face with you, or with us, our wickedness as a culture comes face to face with us, it's an opportunity to refine our integrity, to release that and to stop being that. That's what that opportunity is. So it's always God teaching us. And to ask for the eyes that God has, the way that God sees this world. And there's Bette Midler sing a song that God is watching us from a distance, which some people don't like to say that he's from a distance because he's very near, but her point, I think, in the lyrics of the song, and she wasn't the person who wrote the song, but is that when God looks at us, it's all beautiful to him. It's all stuff that he loves. It's all stuff that he made, that it's good. And he gave us our choices, and that's good. And he trusts us to learn from our choices, even when we're in the descent, even when we're in the hell. Usually the hells that we've made, sometimes they're hells that other people have made that we get affected by, but a lot of times it's our own hells. But it's all God. The reach of God is not barred at hell. God can reach into hell. And another part I like in the New Testament where it says the pure in heart will see God. That doesn't mean that if you become pure enough you're going to see God eventually in a one-time event, or you'll get to see him after you die. It means that if your heart is pure, you will see God everywhere. Everything will look like God to you. Even the leper, which was Jesus's template for of how he saw God in everyone that other people had a hard time seeing God in. And of course that means every people, it means everything, all the creation that there is. And this is a comforting God, or a comforting thought. It is a comforting God. But it's also a terrible God, a great and terrible God that challenges us, and that there is wrath in God. Wrath is not anger. Anger might be part of wrath, but wrath is the consequence of God. Wrath is that teaching of God that says, I am not going to be satisfied with you staying in hell. I need you to see what it is you're doing to destroy yourselves and others. I'm going to confront you with this. I'm going to challenge you to release these things and become free and understand that my arms have always been around you. So the wrath of God is also God's blessing. Now, I say these things in terms of religious imagery, and I love religious imagery, and it makes sense to me, and it's like a poetic and a shorthand. But this project, and also a lot of people understand these images, so I'm speaking to people who know these images. But if that's not your groove, it's okay. We can go to the love part. Everything is love or a call for love. And everything that is difficult to love is still asking you for that love. It's challenging you to reach the level of love that would be able to love that. And love, of course, is transformative. I mean, you can't force people or make people make choices that they're not prepared to make, but love does get people to the point where they can change. It does have that power. And there's a beautiful quote by Joseph Smith that says something about being taken by the hand with tenderness is the best way to be able to forsake sin. And sometimes we have to be, told how it is. Like, we have to get a, in your face 2x4 sometimes from life. Like, stop this pathway. It only leads to your chains and your destruction. This is not so much, if you don't want to think about it in terms of God, this is about us as human beings and the choices we make. And we can't say that, we can't pretend like the things that we do don't have consequences. And that there isn't, and we also can't pretend that there isn't an opportunity in everything that comes our way. There's a treasure in everything. The challenge is in the treasure. And the final thing that I want to share is in the Book of Mormon, there are brothers, Nephi and Sam, and Laman and Lemuel. And Laman and Lemuel did not handle life well. And indeed, their family went through a lot of challenges. But the thing is that as God led them, God gave them both the same gifts. He talked to both of them as they wanted. Laman and Lemuel didn't want to hear. Nephi and Sam kept themselves open so that they could hear that guidance. But they still, Nephi and Sam didn't get rid of Laman and Lemuel, at least until much later, when it was it became clear that if they didn't leave, they would be killed. But they kept Laman and Lemuel with them the whole time because they were a family. And they went on the same journey. They had the same challenges. But Nephi and Sam approached those challenges very differently than Laman and Lemuel. And they both received what in the Book of Mormon is called the Promised Land, which is also the, in the Old Testament with the children of Israel. And God did not withhold the Promised Land from Laman and Lemuel, but they couldn't experience the joy of that because of their choices of how they looked at the world and how they behaved. And all they desired was enmity. They desired enmity, and they created enmity. But God's blessings were the same. The journey was the same from the universe side of things. You can call it universe instead of God. The difference was in the approach that those brothers had. And that's the same for us. The blessings are all here. You're not being unblessed. There's no way that God could unbless you. He only has blessings for you. And even the things about world peace, I invite you to not think of the challenges that we have as opposite to world peace, but as a pathway to and through to the peace. Even the worst things, like, human sex trafficking. This is the most horrible thing that I can just think of off the top of my head. One of the most horrible things. But this is an opportunity to learn to value ourselves a whole bunch higher, to learn to make choices about how we participate in sexuality, or actually that's more like violence. They wouldn't do those things if there wasn't a market for them. So we have to ask ourselves, who are the pimps wicked? Are the people that have to do are the people that have to do the sex work wicked? No, neither of them are wicked. Who's wicked? It's people who are asking for this. It's people who have an appetite for this. And if we didn't have an appetite for this, it would go away in an instant. So the opportunity is to examine ourselves, but the opportunity is to step up and refuse to have this be a part of our world. Because all of those people, both those who are pimps, both those who are sex workers, both those who are, even those who partake of this, they are all in chains, and they are all our brothers and sisters, and they all can have an opportunity to join the place of God, because they're not really out of it. They're just a little lost, and a lot lost in that instance. And I'm bringing this one up because it's an extreme example that people say, oh, this is profane, this is hell, this is wickedness. It is hell. But what people don't realize is that hell is actually a part of heaven. It's a place where you start. You go through hell on your way to heaven. You go through the wilderness on the way to the promised land. That is the way that you go, because you have to become strong. You have to know your hell, and you have to overcome it. And then you know your heaven, and nobody can take your heaven away from you because you did it. Not by yourself, because we can always have help and we can tap into that universe and that love. Not by yourself, but for yourself. No one can do it for you. You have to take it up and say who you are, that you are God, that you are that place where God comes into this world. And we do it despite our many weaknesses and downfalls, and sometimes so many downfalls that we just despair that we would ever be different. But God isn't waiting for you on the other side. He's always with you. You know that poem that's kind of corny, but it never goes out of style. The footprints in the sand, that God is walking beside you. There's 2 rows of footprints in the sand, and then all of a sudden there's just one set of footprints during the hardest part of the walk, and then the person remonstrates with God, why did you leave me at the hardest part? I didn't leave you. That's where I picked you up and carried you. So the only footprints are God's. And even Jesus said, Father, why are you forsaking me? So we all know what it feels like to be forsaken by God. And we are in a God-forsaken world, it seems like. But that's hiding the fact that God, not he, it's every, God is not a he or she, but it's hiding the fact that God is in everything, and all we need is not all, it's a hard process, but to have our eyes open so that we can see that God in everything and hold on to it. And if you find God crucified on a cross, and if you find God in a tomb, break down the stone and take a hold of his hand and take the shrouds off his face, which is what Jesus did for Lazarus. Take the shrouds off his face and help him to rise up if you find God in a tomb. Okay? It's all God. See ya.